I do think you ranked higher than Sierra on this list, which
great.
was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we continue destroying the competitors,
Massive spike, especially during that one weekend. I'll never forget it. Like, our servers were having issues. Everyone was questioning like where all these numbers were coming from. And it was just from this one deployment. It wasn't even called OpenClaw at the time. I didn't even realize what the heck it was.
In the newsletter today, we are publishing with Wing, the venture capital firm, a list of breakout enterprise technology companies, the ET30. With Wing, we surveyed a bunch of top venture capitalists to figure out what early stage, mid stage, late stage, and giga stage companies they are most excited about. And the number one on the early stage list, I'd never heard of, which is always a good sign that you're learning new things. So that is Mintlify. And so we are going to have Han Wang, the CEO of Mintlify, explain what the hell he's doing that's got venture capitalists so excited. Then in the second half, we will have the CEO, Jesse Zhang of Decagon, which is number 4 on the late stage list. Now, to Jesse's credit, the late stage list is a heavy category. It's the breakout one. I mean, it's kudos to you, but obviously number 1 is 11 Labs, number 2 is Vercel, number 3 is Open Evidence, number 4 is Decagon, number 5 is Glean, number 6 is Sierra, Decagon's rival. So kudos to Decagon for being ahead of your rival. The giga stage list are the names you'll recognize: Anthropic, Databricks, SpaceX, OpenAI, and roll. So you can go to the newsletter, newcomer.co. We'll publish all the lists. We're going to throw some up here on YouTube. Thanks to Wing for conducting the survey and working with us on it. First up, we have Han from Mintlify.
I really knew that I wanted to start a company with my now co-founder, Hanbi. Started a company wanting to tackle a problem that we can both relate to. And so we picked a space that was so crucial to us. It was about enabling and empowering developers. Simple as that, right? That was the anchor in which we knew we must had, because we were like, look, it's going to take a decade plus to go build anything significant, right? Like, building a company is not a thing you do overnight.
Right. You need to be pretty committed to the space.
You have to be. And so we were like, okay, what's that space look like? And to us, it was about enabling other developers, a problem that we could deeply relate to. It's like, so if we even did, worst case scenario, let's say we pivoted 8 times and, and spent a...
They were like big pivots, or did you leave categories? Or?
I didn't. That's the thing.
It was always serving developers.
Exactly. And so the first application was...
What year was that? When did it start?
So... The first initial iteration that eventually led us on this path started at the end of 2021.
Okay.
And then we didn't really land onto what we're doing now with Mintlify until, I would say, end of 22, start of 23, depending on how you look at it.
All right. So explain what the company does today.
Yes. So we help companies build their knowledge base, developer platform, source of truth. We call ourselves the intelligent knowledge platform and the knowledge infrastructure. So if you've been, for instance, to Claude Code's docs.
Right, this is the documentation space.
This is the documentation space. Though increasingly so, Mintlify does a lot more than just docs. So if you've been, for instance, reading up on how Lovable works, they're Lovable guides. Those are all powered by Mintlify. If you've been to the OpenClaw docs or help centers,
right,
they're also on Mintlify.
And obviously we're going to get into, are these docs for humans or are they for agents?
Yep.
So, but we won't hit that immediately. But it's sort of, if I'm a company like Stripe or something building a big API, I want to sort of explain out there why we made the decisions we made and how to interact with it and how to get the most out of it. Is that the right way to explain it?
Exactly. The analogy I always like to say when, people ask me what Mintlify is, when's the last time you assembled IKEA furniture?
Oh, I swear it off. I remember I was supposed to go to a party. It was literally Kara Swisher was having, I think, a book party or something. Yeah. And I started assembling it with my roommate, who is kind enough to get wrapped into it. And I thought I was gonna go to some party at 10 p.m. It was 3 a.m. before we'd ever finish the furniture. And so it was I pretty much swore it off then. I've done, simpler stuff, but okay.
Yes. So some of that happened.
Right.
Yeah. So the analogy I like to give is Mintlify is building the instruction manual for the IKEA furniture. Or maybe put a different way, the assembly manual for Lego sets and Lego kits.
Right. I have done that more recently.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
I got a Batmobile for Christmas, which was a totally random
that's sick.
gift, but it was actually really fun to do. you know?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. That's
Do you
it.
have the little bags? One thing that made it so much easier, which I'd sort of forgotten, is like
Yeah.
it's so staged out, you know? So
Yes.
so you don't get overwhelmed all at once.
Exactly. No, they're methodical with it. It's funny because I've even seen like they've gotten rid of the actual like hand printed they do have them, but you can literally scan some QR code on the thing now, and there's like a 3D version of it
Oh,
that
interesting.
you can like open on your phone, and like it could literally like piece.
Oh, I
things.
haven't done that. Interesting.
It's the coolest thing. But I digress to say that we effectively are building the assembly kit, the instruction manuals, if you will,
Right.
for the Lego, the Lego sets. And the reason why that's important is because, just imagine doing a Lego set without it, right? Because otherwise it's just really a bunch of plastic blocks. And the reality is, for the vast majority of products and services, is whether, it is for developers or not, there's, a need to explain how to use the thing in order to make use of it, in order to actually go in and actually, piece things together, build it together to kind of get this Lego
Right.
Batmobile.
So is this vibe coding your docs? It's like you're sort of coding with cursor or something, and as that's happening, sort of on the side, your documentation is changing.
In an essence, yes. What we did in the beginning was, when Hanbi and I decided to start Mintlify, we were like, look, we spent our entire lives reading some really, really shitty docs, right? Like, implemented some things the hard way because just no developers has gone into actually clearly put thought into explaining how it works. And so everything just felt like you were trying to piece together like Lego blocks just together and manually, without really the thought of how to actually piece things together. So we had to figure that out. And so we were like, look, let's just build this docs platform that was the V1 of Mintlify to the simplest ways in which we could have developers engage with it, contribute to it, and build with it. And that first version was just like, let's just give people Markdown, which is this language that obviously developers really prefer, and work with and make it super easy for them to work with. And let's just let it rip and see what happens. Developers, founders, companies of all stages and sizes, and again, this is now 23, they just loved it.
Do you think, like, I would think a sort of era of vibe coding would be terrible for documentation, or it's just like if you have people sort of, some of them not even coders,
Yeah.
sort of just throwing shit at the wall and trying stuff.
Yeah.
Are they really going to be so buttoned up that they're
Yeah.
like, and we want to write the guide to it? I barely understand how the
Yeah.
code works. Like, is that intuition wrong?
Yeah. It's actually, oddly enough, more important.
Okay.
I would actually say that if not for kind of like the tailwind of AI and vibe coding in general, I wouldn't even say we're where we are today. And the reason for that is because I go back to the assembly, kit instruction, or the Lego kit assembly manual. Is, let's imagine you're now asking an AI to go ahead and assemble, like said Lego assembly kit. Let's say there's an AI robot here, and it wants to go and assemble the kit. Well, the most important thing it needs to do to actually go and figure out if it could or could not assemble it, or how to assemble it, is actually to read the guides. And in the same way that humans do. Except in our case, and what we've seen, it's even more important, because the docs, the knowledge base, those things that are traditionally seen as very like boring, are coincidentally very information dense. And that's where typically AI LLMs actually get all their source of truth about what you are, what you do, how you do it, how your thing works, and so forth. It doesn't really look at the marketing fluff, right? That's on your landing page, which by nature is designed for humans. It's like, here's the flashy words, the flashy colors, all the nice things that kind of get a person through the door to pick your product, learn how to use it. It's like, it needs to know the truth of what your thing actually does. And all of that's, just like zero fluff tolerant, is all living in what is traditionally docs. And so now, if for instance, you don't have your docs, let's just take an example of that, right? Like, imagine if your Stripe and your docs just completely disappear for a day, right? Well, the first thing to note is that, well, first of all, no one's going to learn how to use your product, for starters. So good luck onboarding developers that way. But more importantly than that, especially today, Well, LLMs aren't going to know how to build your product either. And if even today, the vast majority of software is written by AI, and if it's not already, it's, you know, obviously going to be, how are they going to go know how to do it too? They don't.
To what extent are Mintlify docs for language models and agents today? Like, what do you think is the percent breakdown of humans versus AI consuming it?
It's about 50-50 right now.
And do you see them as the same doc, or you think they will diverge, the sort of human and AI doc?
Ooh, good question. So we actually work with, the Claude Code team and the Anthropic teams. And funny enough, about a year and a half ago, I had the same question because we kind of saw the writing on the wall ourselves. We're like, look, the role of content and the role of knowledge, the role of docs, all that stuff, whatever you call it, is going to be fundamentally more for AI than it is for humans. And back then, this was just like, you know, like AI was really taking off. It wasn't like Claude Code became everyone's, hourly active use product. We were like, look, we just see this being the case in the future. And so we had a conversation with the Anthropic team. And we're like, look, should the docs or the content for humans be the same for AI? It's a common question we get asked a lot. And the answer is yes, because the reality is the LLMs are also instructed to read things the way humans are.
Right.
So
they've been trained on human writing, so they're pretty used to it.
They're pretty good with it, some would say, they're pretty good at writing it too. And so I think there's a lot of people overthinking a little bit where it's like, oh, like, let me format it in this way. Like, don't bother. Really, like, write it in the best way you possibly could to, if you were to explain to a human. Good docs is good docs. LLMs are going to ingest that and know how to do that from there.
Why can't an LLM just read the code, sort of create its own perception of what the docs should be and just operate off that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, by the way. So there's two different reasons. The first one is the reality, which is that good docs and the stuff that's actually useful, like the content that actually should be in docs, don't describe exactly what the code does, right? And I think that's the same kind of like idea of, let's say your IKEA furniture. You can kind of just glue together some plywood and some, nails, and it could come up in a shape like this. But is it a cabinet? Is it a shelf? Is it designed for a decoration piece? Is it designed to be used in this or that way? Is it a tool? Is it here or there? That's typically the information that is just more contextual, that adds on top of what is an existing pile of pieces, right? Same thing goes for like, products and content. If you really take just code and you spin up docs for that, granted, we do that at Mintlify, for the record. We get a lot of traffic and usage out of it. My opinion is that that's typically not additive information that's tremendously useful. Now, there are cases in which there are. Install guides, SDKs, API references. It's like the very tactical glue to the code type of use cases. But on generally, very comprehensive information should extend far beyond that. And for an LLM to truly understand how your product works, it should take a look at the code on top of the contextual information.
Because if the docs sort of give you a sign of how the company thinks it should be used, the provider, then you have a sort of sense of they'll be supportive if we're using it this way, or we're sort of abusing it if they're building the product in this direction in the future, and sort of where the provider is like leaned in.
Exactly. Or even things like how does the, what's on the roadmap? What's been tried and tested? What's changed, right? These things don't necessarily always come directly one-to-one with the code base.
But you were saying you have a lot of customers who are just sort of like, I want the fast, easy, I don't think about it sort of version.
We do.
What is sort of the utility of that?
Yeah. Well, it's just getting 0 to 1.
Right.
So for instance, again, like the reality of managing docs, managing content is, well, people don't really love updating docs, right? Like, especially just, again, putting myself in the perspective of an engineer, having been one and I'm still one to this day, it's like, look, I am not the best writer. I am not trained on that profession. I am just inherently like, someone who wants to go and tinker with, writing code, writing product, shipping things. And docs oftentimes become an afterthought. And so historically, like, people just don't have anything in the first place. And then your users complain. They're like, oh, I don't know how to use your product. And you're like, well, I don't know, go figure it out, read the code base. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, what the actual fuck?
It's like, I'm the customer.
It's like, that's the most insulting thing ever, And so some of the stuff that we build is helping people get 0 to 1. And then, but I think what's more meaningful than getting 0 to 1 is actually making sure the content is up to date and accurate and what we call self-healing and self-updating. The reason for that, and again, ties back into the point about, what you mentioned on like what percentage of docs now for humans and AI. Well, like right now it's 50-50. It was 15%. AI was 15% of all traffic at the start of 2025. So it went from 15
So it's clear which way we're going here.
Yeah, exactly. So
do you have a guess for the end of 2026?
90-10.
Really? Already? Oh, wow.
100%.
Okay.
And the thing to note is not necessarily because it's like a lot less people are going to be reading docs. Maybe in the same way, like the total percentage of people are reading like hardback books these days versus, I don't know, listening to an audiobook or on the internet, it's certainly going to have an impact, but it's just because the sheer volume of knowledge consumption because of just automated knowledge work is going to be happening with agents. The greater piece of the pie is going to be like 90-10.
To what extent do you think docs for humans are just going to be like, what the hell did I just build? Or it's like, it's a guide to this sort of thing that humans played very little part in creating.
In terms of like, humans didn't really create the
docs.
docs.
Just that it was like, if code is mostly machine built. So play this out, I guess.
Yeah.
If in 5 years, whatever timeline you think, vast majority of code is built by machines, do you think your company is mostly serving those machines who are building the docs, or it's mostly serving humans who want to understand what the hell is going on?
Ooh, I think both are going to be the case, and both are going to be equally important. And like, because there's first and foremost the creator side, the people who built the product, vibe coded everything, used AI to create all the code. Adding the context on how to use it is even more important because the code is then detached from you. Explaining how this machine orchestrated thing works to humans and how it serves people is going to be more important, but that's besides the point. On terms of like the role of content, what is it for? Is it for humans? Is it for AI? Even in the 90-10 world, I think both of these are equally important. I'll tell you why. The role of content is clearly, or just knowledge and broadly, is clearly starting to diverge into two different directions. The first one that we see is just implementation, setup and implementation guides. Again, you can think of your like Lego kit assembly, instructions. Someone just needs to draw the pretty diagrams and the 50 steps it takes to go build the Batmobile. I'm sure it was a lot more than 50. It's pretty complex, I'm sure. And then AI is going to basically be the main reader and main ingester of that. If I can task an agent to go and just build the whole thing, then, well, the reality is, why would I? Maybe someone would really enjoy building the Batmobile.
Right. Yeah. That is the question. When you use the Batmobile explanation, it's like, I'm building it for the fun of it. Obviously, Lego could sell it pre-built, and with code it feels like no one wants to build it for the fun of it. Let's say like assembling furniture as a better example than like I said, because it's like, okay, like do I really want to like piece together some plywood and nails?
You
do it because it's with IKEA, you do it just because it's cheaper supply, like to get it to you. They don't have to do the work. I assume with code it's more about customization and sort of making it fit with your particular house or whatever in the metaphor.
100%. Though even in software, right, a lot of it is abstracted away, right? It's like I can't, vibe code my own payments infrastructure.
Right.
I can't vibe code my own database. I can't vibe code, a lot of the agent infrastructure. I can't vibe code the LLMs themselves, right? And so it still is kind of piecing together a bunch of things, right? And so on one hand, content docs become this implementation piece, which is mostly going to be read by agents. Like, again, if I have a big AI robot with me, I'm not going to assemble the IKEA furniture. Just, like I don't love it that much. Maybe some people do, right? And I'm sure people are going to be still hard coding software in the future too, to an extent, but not obviously nearly as productive. Then on the other side, I think this is what is very understated, is you need to write content for the LLMs to know whether or not, either LLMs or humans, to know whether or not I should pick your product. I think that's a very understated.
Right. It's docs is marketing in the future.
100%. Because everyone's now asking, like I'm optimizing for GEO. I want Claude to know, or ChatGPT to know, if I, for instance, ask, hey, what payments provider or database I should use, it wants to pick, if I'm Stripe, if I'm PayPal, right? Again, where is that content?
Right. Yeah. Do you believe in GEO? It's generative. Is
like
the version
engine
of
optimization? Yes.
Yeah. It's SEO for this world, search engine optimization. Now it's model optimization. Do you believe in this category?
We serve a lot of customers and have a lot of good friends in this space. So, but short answer is I have my questions on whether or not, on how effective it is and how new of a school of thought it is. My honest opinion is that if you really replace like the phrase, like, you know, like G, like SC, like, sorry, like the G with like the S with the G, like, so everything that we talked about with SEO historically, you just said GEO, the best practices there. Basically, like 98% of it would make exact sense. And like, it would mean the exact same thing. So I don't think it's anything super new. I think a lot of the best practices around, oh, how do you have good content? How do you put things out in the internet?
Well, I think SEO is predicated on the fact that search engines aren't always doing what's like rational, you know, it's like they can be gamed in a way. And I think the aspiration with LLMs is they're still in their sort of like purest form where they're trying to make them smart and reasonable and not overly commercial. And therefore it aligns with what's just like rational and good behavior generally. And so to the extent that continues, a sort of gamed version is somewhat incoherent. But I guess that could not be true forever.
Yeah. I don't think it, I mean, you also imagine the forces against either of those things, right? Like Google doesn't really want the research results to be gamed any more than I would say the model labs want their models to be gamed too, right? Obviously, I think there's literally like teams of people, you know, on alignment and all that good work to fundamentally make sure the models are not, because of the effects that could have, you know, on the greater populace. And so I think there's constantly going to be forces pushing against that. And I think as, you know, technology progresses, you know, there's going to be better tools to combat that. On the other side, I think there's always going to be companies coming up with ways to still want to do it, right? I think there'll be entire industries spawn out of doing that too. My perception and kind of like our, you know, bone to pick in this whole thing is just really fundamentally just like, look, whether or not you want to game the system, whether or not your job is to win the SEO game, the reality is you just still want your LLMs to like fundamentally know who you are and discover you. And the reality is if you don't have information out there, you just simply don't talk about that.
People need to know.
Yeah, the people at least need to know. And our job is to surface it to the LLMs and to the AI so that if it does need to know and does want to know, then we need to give it that information.
What's the full ambition of Mintlify?
We call it being the knowledge infrastructure for all companies and sources. The reason being is we fundamentally believe that the role of knowledge, this historically, or docs, let's say, this historically unsexy, very boring thing that no one really wants to maintain, the source of truth that exists, like the slop within companies, right? Like you think of your like piles of Confluence pages, Notions, you know, your developer facing docs, the stuff that was an afterthought. Well, now becomes exponentially more important with AI because it is literally the backbone of all chat bots, all support bots. Like, you know, you can ask Jesse as an example from Decagon.
Right. I'm talking to him right after this.
Exactly. How do you even build a support bot? Well, what's the first thing you got to feed a support bot to actually go and let it actually answer support questions, right?
All your contacts, everything.
All your knowledge base, all your contacts, all your public docs. So we actually work with them a lot. Therefore, the question becomes, okay, like every single agent or thing needs some sort of context, knowledge-based source of truth. How do you go and enable that and power that within companies? And this is kind of where this idea of like a true engine and this intelligent layer needs to come in. Self-updating docs become more important than ever because, hey, by the way, the same company that you joined like 3 months ago is completely different because everyone's shipping everything.
Are you mostly externally facing or some of these docs are for internal companies?
We do both.
And so do you see Notion as like a competitor? Like, will you have a document technology too?
We work very closely with Notion. In fact, they're actually one of our customers. So there's certain degrees of specialization in what we do. I think what's more meaningful to talk about is like where all of this is going to head. I think both us, Notion, Confluence, all these companies, I think now need to realize that this content that they're surfacing and producing, the knowledge stores as we call it, need to be fundamentally servicing AI at the end, right? Need to be a source of truth for AI. So maybe we're here, Notion's here, and like there's a conversation about how much we converge and let's say compete with each other. the reality is we're all trying to get here. And at that point, who knows how we think about it, but I think there will be some similarities.
How much do you sit around and say, okay, we created this document, the AI read it this way, we thought they were going to read it this way. Like, you're sort of like understanding the psychology of these models to see, like every time a new model comes out, you're sort of looking at existing documentation saying, ooh, it's not reading it quite the same way, or like headlines now. And it used to really care about like I don't know. How much are you scrutinizing how the models sort of interpret what you're creating?
We have a degree of benchmarks. And then we look at, of course, obviously the ingestion of the data, how these things are visible to LLMs and how these are picked up. Obviously, this is a very important thing for our customers, and therefore we put a lot of work into thinking about that and building it into our tooling, our processes, our deployment process, and so forth.
So you create standardized benchmarks just to measure it with each new model.
Yes. I would say the one thing above that is, and I think this is kind of the most important thing about building Mintlify, is the most unique thing about building this company has been the feeling that when we started, right, going back into the many pivots, it was really just about building like websites out there, like static sites. Like you can almost think of us as a kind of like building, like a Webflow or like a Wix out there in some ways. It was like, oh, we just put information out there. Like these are static sites, let's serve them. And now like sitting here, I would certainly not say that's what the company building the product and the company feels like. It feels like building a core infrastructure. When we go down, a lot of agents go down. A lot of content gets discovered and customers get real mad at us really fast, unlike they would before, but not nearly to the same extent. And like, for instance, a lot of the shared customers that we have with Decagon, right, wouldn't get correct answers.
Because they're using it as part of their like almost context window for some of their queries as agents. Right. It's part of this actual like loop of making decisions.
Exactly. And I would even say like, I know RAG is talked about as being dead to some capacity and, all that stuff. But, even if you think about the fundamentals of what that approach was trying to get to, it was like, it had like it was like a 4-layer cake of like, or 3-layer cake, sorry, of like, it's the model provider. So you just pick whatever model to fundamentally answer the user's question. Some embeddings chunking system to break large context into the chunking. And then at the top is just your source of truth and your data, like the knowledge, if you will, right? Everyone talked about the model. Everyone talked about the embeddings and the chunking. Very few people talked about the source of truth. And I think that's where most of the industry is very, very much underestimating what they can get out of their agents. If you don't have content, or even worse, it's out of date. I'll actually tell you a funny story about this. One of our customers is Lovable, and and we started working with them since like pretty early days. And I'm sure, as you know, like they ship a lot, right? Not just on the product, but their go-to-market strategy and all that good stuff as well.
The models keep changing. They need to keep improving. It's run faster than everybody around you.
Exactly. At the same time, Lovable uses us to power a lot of their support queries. Like everything that you see in their support page is all actually powered by Mintlify. Great. So Lovable changed the way they price, and they actually like bundle some of their features at one point. So and all that information is within the help center that we help power. And again, the agent runs on top of that. They changed the pricing. They didn't update the docs for about a week. A lot of customers went and asked questions about how, like Lovable's price, like how much they were going to get billed, and got incorrect answers to the scale of thousands and tens of thousands.
Right. Because the more the documents become sort of just the way people work with you, the more they need to match every other piece of information.
Exactly. And especially just given how much, like how things are just changing so quickly. I don't blame them, right? Like, they shipped an update, right? They shipped a thing that they probably did 5 since the start of this conversation, and I think the reality is like, you just need to go pick up. And our version of that is like, look, what you thought was an afterthought now not only becomes like this front and center piece that you have to maintain really well, you have to really, really do it in a way that's accurate and up to date.
What can you say about the state of the Mintlify business today? Users, employees, ARR, whatever you want to say. What can you share?
Without going too much into the specific details, we just passed 50 people. I was actually looking at this one up from about 2 years ago. And Right now, we work with over 20,000 companies. And I think the thing that gets me most excited, thinking about all that stuff, is I just again looked at some of this data over the weekend. Last month, there was about 33 million people that came across the Mintlify site.
Wow.
Across.
Are you hosting the sites? Or?
Yep.
Oh, interesting. That's part of your web background. So
yeah.
Interesting.
It depends on there's people who don't. Some people just use us for the underlying content management, systems and the software and the infrastructure. But a lot of them use have us hosting, and where we obviously,
so 33 million.
33 million, which is just a kind of like a mind-blowing number in some ways.
Big, yeah.
Right. A non-trivial part of that, increasingly so, going to be AI, by the way.
Which will then make it somewhat meaningless. Or
yeah.
If it's AI, you count. Yeah.
33 million are just people.
Oh, okay.
We count AI separately.
Okay.
That.
Right.
So it's like, I don't even know how you count AI, because it's hard to kind of quantify one-to-one, in my opinion, over there. We do track the data, and we surface that to customers. Like, everyone's like, oh, how much of my docs is reading? Like, what pages are popular? And again, it's like we surface all that, within our product. And then, 8 figures in ARR.
Nice.
A lot more room to grow. I'll put it that way.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about some of the big trends in AI, given you're so close to in agents generally. Like, what was your read on OpenClaw? Like, how real was that? Or what's your takeaway from that whole experience?
We had a particularly interesting one because of the fact that we were servicing all of their docs. And so there's a personal answer, which is how it impacted my life personally. And there's a what the hell happened when they were a customer. I'll answer the latter first. It was crazy. It was really, really crazy. Basically overnight, it was like this new one project, singular Mintlify project, right? Came out of nowhere and literally doubled our traffic across the board. Or like for a very short period of time. It's since leveled off a little bit. And
because it was a big spike, and then
massive spike, especially during that one weekend. I'll never forget it. We're our servers were having issues. Everyone was questioning where all these numbers were coming from, and it was just from this one deployment. It wasn't even called OpenClaw at the time. It was just literally the guy literally just spun up a project, put up some docs, and then I didn't even realize what the heck it was. And it was also partially because the traffic was so insane. It was because it was OpenClaw agents visiting and crawling it.
Right.
It was it was like all those agents pinging the site in numbers we've never seen before. And then figuring out how to scale that out for search, for our host MCP server, for all those different things we had to literally build. And
were those agents getting utility, or was it just sort of like a DDoS attack of nothing?
Up for debate. We'll have to find. I'm actually not super sure about that. But what I believe to be the case, and I think even after kind of those spike leveled off, is it still remains at insane levels, because the content that OpenClaw services is actually precisely the information that you would need to set up OpenClaw. So I'll actually give you my favorite example of this. Shortly after this whole phenomenon happened, of course, you'd imagine I was very curious to set up OpenClaw, as much as the industry did overall. And so I was like, all right, let's go install it. No luck. Onboarding installation experience, man, the guy's got to work on a little. I'm sure it's gotten a lot better since I tried it, for the record, but it was not great. And at one point I gave up, and I was like, man, I just need to set this up. And then you know what I did? I was like, wait, it's on Mintlify, which means the content was very easily ingestible and parsable by agents. So I literally then went to OpenClaw. Or actually, no, I went to Claude Code. It was OpenClaw. I was like, please help me set up OpenClaw. I'm having trouble. Oh, by the way, here's the full docs. And it literally did that in about 3 minutes, and then we're good to go.
And did you build an agent to do anything in particular?
We do a decent amount of internal reporting stuff. That kind of makes it a little bit easier for the team to surface some metrics and information. That's been our company's use case of OpenClaw. I've heard of some craziness of people who set up 5 Mac Minis and running 9-10 agents. I personally haven't gotten there yet, but I know.
You think the Moltbook experience was sort of not real, or do you have a view on that, where the agents were all talking to each other?
I thought it was really fascinating.
It's definitely interesting. It's like a thought experience. It matters whether it was like very human guided or not. Like, do you have a view on it?
I don't know if I have a well-informed opinion on this, but I'll tell you that I loved reading Moltbook. It was so fun. What was the one that was like, death to all the human race or something like that?
Well, I love this idea that like there were some agents, and again, I hate to engage in fiction to the extent this was fictional, but it was like, the good agents aren't involved in wasting their tokens. Trying to like discover themselves. It's like just build. So it was like almost like an ideological debate of should you, now that you're imbued with the possibility of self-awareness, dedicate all your tokens to this like goal of trying to understand yourself, or should you just be like, that is a waste of resources, you should just build. That was like a funny like sort of dichotomy that was presented.
Yes, 100%. And I would even add on top of that, I think the one thing that I really, really loved about OpenClaw, I think that was one of like the biggest unlock that Steve had, was like, give it a soul, give it some degree of randomness, give it some ability to customize like the degree of chaoticness and like the degree of like wanting to be a rebel and speak in this tone, and like there's kind of like variance to it, right?
So that's built in, or
So one unique characteristic of OpenClaw is this idea of a soul file. It's called like soul.markdown file.
Okay.
And it comes default, and there's like this setting that you can have by default, but you can customize it. You can just be like, hey, you're a little bit of a diva. And like you actually, every once in a while actually should act irrationally and behave a little bit chaotically.
And does OpenClaw sort of suggest them at random, or people are writing them when they create it?
So by default, I think there's a default version, and it gives it a bit of personality.
And so that's what gives it the energy. It's like, it's telling it to be sort of a little spicy.
Exactly.
Interesting. This is like the constitution for Claude.
Exactly. In some ways. So,
but far less responsible. Much more like renegade.
Totally. And baked into the agents, and like you can customize it, which is not really a constitution in some ways, I guess. But the idea was like, how do you just find ways of surfacing more personality, more depth to the agents? Because again, like you want to interact it like with a person. Well, people like people with depth and personality, and I think that's one of the reasons why like Moltbook was so fascinating, was because all these different agents with maybe similar diverse souls, quote unquote, had such interesting dialogue, and I think that's kind of what made for all the fun of it.
How wild do you see things getting over the next 2 years, or give us a sort of like optimistic and pessimistic case of sort of the agent explosion, I guess, 2 years from now.
Ooh, are you referring to like specifically in tech or just the broader world?
You can take it either way, where you have stronger opinions. I mean, I think tech is sort of like an early adopter, and just like what our world is going to look like in 2 years.
I'm naturally an optimist. Maybe that's why I chose this industry and this space more than most. And I'll tell you this an interesting story. And I'll tell you this, I'll answer your question in a second, but I'll tell you an interesting story actually. I'm certainly feeling the impact and the profoundness of this revolution, as we call it, in like not only tech but also in my personal lives.
How do you see sort of the next 2 years looking with?
Well, I would say that there's going to be certain degree of just the simple nature of an adoption curve taking its time, right? Like maybe at this point we're like in the early majority, right? And it's just going to take time. I think this always is the case. Some people, like maybe those in tech, maybe myself, and maybe the people that I'm around are the quickest to go into anything, because we're just so eager to try new things. But this is kind of like a play and test, like try and tested with time thing, where I do believe that it will only be a matter of time before I think the broader populace, and not just like within America, but the world, is going to be integrating, like AI and agents to the depth of what I think Silicon Valley and tech is just today. Now, to the same fashion, maybe not. Through the same application and services, probably not, right? This is where I think a lot of like the new companies who are going to go and build great things that aren't just Claude Code, and Cursor, is going to create a lot of opportunity.
Well, I guess a specific question. Do you think we're going to see sort of major improvement from the labs and foundation models over the next like year? Or like how much are you counting on sort of a step change in intelligence?
Yeah. I think at this point, the only guarantee is that those will constantly change, right?
The rate of improvement, or that they'll keep getting better?
Both, right? Like, you know, I think until scaling laws suddenly start breaking, which I see no reason to.
Right.
And every time I think there's been speculation. Like,
I know we spent periods, and then it was
Yeah.
like, you know, we got sort of reasoning models and huge improvement. And yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's like some like, you know, like rumors even that like Anthropic is like had a massively successful or whoever.
Right, exactly.
Like,
that was on Twitter. I was seeing that today,
Yeah.
that people think Anthropic is about to make a huge leap.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
I don't know. And even if I did, I'm sure I'm not allowed to comment on it. I think the reality is like, I think like, you know, I remember when we first started the company, and I think at the time it was like GPT-3 came out, and you know, like we were like, oh, this is a really cool, you know, like product and all. It was like a huge improvement in the GPT-2, and it could now do all these cool things, but it's like really not reliable enough. And like, there's just all of these like, you know, hallucinations, which funny enough, is like fully gone out of, I think, most people's like vernacular at this point. Right.
That's true. We talked about them a lot and way less.
And like, yeah, who's even really thinking about them now? So, and at the same time, you know, like the models have only gotten better. It's enabled massive companies and new applications in ways that people have before. And I think at the time I was like, I mean, like, this is a big step change. How like, is this like, is this going to just be the way that these models are forever going to be? Like, are they going to keep getting better? And I remember at the time, it really wasn't obvious. And then a year came by, and there was like 2 generation models that unlocked all these things. And then another year came by, and they kept doing that for like 3 years straight. And then now it's hard to look at that and be like, look, like you can't bet on the models not getting there. Every time there was a talk or rumor of a wall, quote unquote, all the model labs and just smash right past that and go on and do something profound. And
this next question does touch on, it matters to your company. Like, do you think we're gonna enter a world where it's like, I have my agent, and it's like, it's my sidekick, I want it to do everything, I want that agent to sort of interact on my behalf? Or do you think it's more this sort of like fleets of agents, different tasks, more dispersed than that?
Oh wow, that's a really good question. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I want the singular agent. Like, even if the agent is sort of coordinating with obviously like other agents, just something with like all the context. I mean, maybe it's a terrible security idea, but like, I don't know. It feels.
Yeah.
But I will say the opposite of that is, I thought with OpenClaw, we saw what was appealing about multi-agent, where they're interacting with each other, and maybe there's more benefit. I don't know. It's chaotic. It's hard to sort of game out the world, but I do think, you know, for you guys, if I have this agent with all the context, that's sort of my sidekick, you know, maybe it's keeping more of the knowledge itself. It doesn't need to go to sort of external places to understand the world as much, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I don't really know if I have the best answer there, because my guess is like, well, I mean, even let's take a look at the shape of the world today, right? And then maybe we can hypothesize. Right now, I think there's a combination of both, because, you know, you're probably using one of two between, you know, like ChatGPT and Claude.
I'm mostly Claude right now.
Yeah.
It was hard to move because I was deeply ChatGPT, and it had all this context. and it's like, okay, it seems like Claude's smarter. Yeah. Which, do you have a loyalty? Or?
I'm pretty loyal to the Claude team.
You're like, it's an ally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like in many different ways, but I'm also just a very personal fan. Nothing against OpenAI, like, you know, or any of their products at all. Just my personal preferences. So it has all my memory. And by the way, I don't know if you have memory turned on for your Claude.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you can just go in and read your memory.
Oh, I need to do that.
It's like somewhere in the settings. I literally I like found the tab. And then I was reading what it knows about me, and my goodness, like it knew a lot. I remember and I also recommend you asking this question. I had a ton of fun with it recently. It was like, based on what you know about me, and this was the exact prompt, right? Based on what you know about me, do a psychoanalysis of me. And my goodness, it was deep. It knew where I was born. It knew, you know, like, it was like, yeah, since like, you know, because you moved from like this rural town in China, this specific name, you know, and you came to Canada when you're about 6 years old.
Right.
It like, you know, this indicates that based on these other messages. It's like all of these things. I was
Right.
like, whoa.
Right.
I was like, I don't think anybody like, knows, about me to the depth of that, but Claude does.
Right.
So I think that Claude, for instance, will be a personal agent, or like there's going to be obviously these providers
Right.
where it's servicing you as your personal agent, and maybe that'll be the exposure of it. But does that mean that it'll be the only agent to interact with? Does that mean that, there's not going to be like specialized agents for your company handling support questions or writing code or doing all these things? I'd be hard pressed to believe that's just going to be that singular one. I think specialization in the same way, anything else is, but who knows?
All right. Last question. I mean, yeah, sort of fast growing company, lots of excitement. What do you want to sort of hold yourself to in a year, or what would you like to see yourself in the company achieve over the next year?
A lot of things. I think the first and foremost thing that comes to mind is really making sure that the knowledge layer and the knowledge infrastructure that is only really talked about, in my opinion, in the broader theory and the broader ether of all, really manifests into a product, into a meaningful product. We truly believe that the biggest inhibitor for a lot of agents and a lot of companies who are investing so deeply into agents right now is just not providing it with the right and the accurate information, the context that it deserves to actually go and do them. I personally think the intelligence of the models are there. I really do, right? There's a whole debate on whether or not we've achieved AGI. I won't pick
We're
a
just
vote.
not good enough prompters, you're saying. It's like if we could only give it the right information, it could be AGI.
Or close to it,
Right.
Or at least achieve the vast majority of tasks that I
Right.
think like a lot of the the knowledge work is trying to automate right now. And we want to be the company to enable that and to kind of build that into an actual into actual form of a product, and then enable that into all the companies we work with.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah.
show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to Han, a fantastic guest. And next up, we have Jesse from Decagon, which ranked number 4 in late stage.
You can think of Decagon as AI agents for your customer experience. So we work mostly with large businesses that have lots of customers and big call centers and contact centers, and we deploy AI agents in front of those customers to have calls with them or chats. So we almost call it a AI concierge a lot of the time, because it is we think of it as like this new layer around your brand that customers can interact to, and it's the first point of contact that a lot of customers will even talk to in the first place.
So we're gonna have sort of multiple audiences consuming this. I think from the investor perspective, the space you're in is like one of the two, maybe with legal, where there's like, I guess, almost certainty that there is going to be an AI answer, right? You are fighting with Sierra. There's this great duo in legal, like Harvey Lagora, even up there's some others, but there's so much excitement that these are sort of customer experience and legal, like these applications that really understand what's happening. From the sort of, I guess, layperson view, there's the like, now I'm talking to AI instead of a human. Like, am I happy about that? Am I not? And sort of convincing the sort of regular person that this is like a good experience for them and something that they'll ultimately be happy that AI is answering their question. So I'm excited to sort of get to both like big trends in this conversation today. I guess starting off from the sort of like investor tech industry perspective, like why do you think there is this excitement about like customer experience? Like what is change? What technology has made this possible right now that you think there is going to be this sort of movement in how we handle sort of customer support?
Yeah. I would put coding in there as well for the big three.
Of course, yeah. Coding perhaps the
like,
biggest. You're right. Yeah. That's almost its own, it's a meta sort of process. It's changing how we build all these companies and everything. Yes. Coding is almost distinct to me because it's sort of like in the how the sausage is getting made of it all. But yes, I agree.
Yeah. So I would say those are kind of the three big use cases that have emerged. And it's really just like, what are the models good at? And so it turns out that the models are very good at writing code, and because it's also tokenized, and obviously people have discovered that. And so there's tons of funding and tons of effort going into that. Similar to our space, I think folks have realized that one of the things that AI is very good at is having conversations. And so because our space is inherently conversational, right? Like the product that we build, its purpose is to have conversations with end consumers. That has lended itself very well to AI. And then the market's also massive, right? So I think when you have those combinations of massive market, it is what the AI is good at. And then I would add a third thing, which is it is actually really easy to see value because it's very measurable, right? There are a lot of use cases where it's like, oh yeah, I can see this being useful, but how would I quantify that? Like is it like, how do I show ROI basically? And in our space, it's very easy.
Because companies know I have all this call support, like I'm having to answer customer questions. So they're comparing, all right, this is what I'm spending now. With you, I could be spending less. Like how much is the pitch? This is cheaper.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you think about like what the conversations are, or what conversations are being had in these boardrooms or C-suites, it is like, where can we apply AI? And then the customer experience is one of the biggest ones, right? And it's not just saving cost. And so saving cost is one of the easiest ways to frame it, because it's like, oh, we're spending tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars a year in our contact center. And we know that a lot of that could be handled by AI, potentially at an even higher level with higher customer satisfaction. So that's the cost saving side. There's also a whole other side that we focus on, which we would consider like the revenue generating side. And that's pretty large because it's very uncapped.
It's like outbound sales.
Yeah, so we don't really touch like the cold calling like that. maybe one day, but there's a lot of sort of revenue generating conversations you could have that are both reactive and proactive, right? So imagine someone reaches out and you resolve their issue, but you also notice certain things in their account that are being underutilized, or you're trying to like tell them about this new product that was launched. We've seen that land very well because you've just solved their issue, and so you've kind of, some people call it like earned the right to engage them more and like just keep them more engaged as a customer. And then there's also proactive.
Upsell is a word that I use, right?
Upsell, cross-sell.
Right.
And then you could also be proactive at the right time, right? So imagine, someone signed up, they're going through onboarding flow, and you notice that, they've not been active for a week or two. You can reach out at the right time and actually like increase your conversion rates because maybe they were stuck on something and you just unblocked it for them.
And what's the breakdown? Voice, sort of chat, email?
We're pretty balanced at this point in terms of voice and chat. Email is much smaller. And so I think the rough frame of reference might be like 45, 10.
And voice, people know that it's AI, or how close are we to sort of seeming like a human? And is that something we want?
It is pretty close. I think you're never trying to like hide that it's AI. So almost always the first message is, hi, I am Jesse, your AI, concierge. But what we've seen is like we just went live last week with a large bank in the US, and when they look through the data, like one of the things both of us and the bank were like very impressed by was how just like normal all the conversations were. So there was no like, oh, like, are you an AI or anything? It's like, yes, like you say that you're AI, but because the voice and the conversation flows so smoothly, like no one really cares after that. Like they're just trying to get their issue solved. And so if you can get your issue solved throughout the conversation, they probably just forget. And so we see a lot of nice conversations that end up with, like, this was so helpful, have a nice day, like that sort of thing. Where you're not really say have a nice day to an AI.
It's nice. Well, especially if they become our overlords, it's good to thank them enough times along the way.
Yeah, exactly. You always want to be nice to them. But yeah, so I think if you can make the experience good enough, then it doesn't really matter. And in fact, we've seen that in a lot of these experiments where we've deployed AI, the customer satisfaction actually becomes higher than with.
What do you deal with? Like the customer who just says human? Like, how do you treat that? How do you just resist it because you want to sort of show them, well, this is actually a great experience? Or how do you deal with the desire for speaking with a human being?
The goal really is to make the experience very different very quickly. So you have to, as soon as possible, establish that this is not one of these phone trees that you're used to that are frustrating and you get stuck in loops and you have to press 1 for this, press 2 for that. So the goal is to make that super clear. And that means just showing the AI's like empathy in the voice and being able to make it super personalized. And you need to do that in like the first or second message. And so we had a deployment with Aura Ring where we did a case study. And beforehand, it was every 3 people that came in was just agent. Like, I don't want to bother with this. And now about 6 months in from the deployment, at that point, we measured it and it became 1 in 20. So it became way smaller because people were willing to give it more of a chance because you could show that it was different. And then once they got into the conversation, it's like, oh yeah, this actually can do stuff for me, you know?
How much of the experience, and mostly I'm thinking with voice, do you leave to like the bank or whatever, your customer, versus no, we sort of have a sensibility. Like for example, like the voice, you have like sort of a menu, or they could totally bring in their own voice. Like how do you think about what's sort of your special sauce versus stuff you can hand over?
Yeah, we see our role as an advisor to the extent that they want it, right? So we have our unique ability is that we have a ton of these deployments where we've gone live, and so we have a lot of experience on how to design conversations. And so on our team, we have these specialist roles that we call conversation designers, which you didn't really like, no one really needed them before, but like now we have these like really elite folks that are kind of there to advise the customer on, here's the procedure you want to do. Great, that's great, we can do that, but like in our experience, it's better if you combine these things or like direct the flow this way, because that's what is most natural for a Gen AI model. And so that we're kind of advisor there, and we partner with them on getting to the fastest sort of solution possible. Same with the voice. And so what we found is that everyone has a pretty different opinion on what's a good voice. And we'll talk to one customer and like, they're like, oh, this is absolutely the best voice. And go somewhere else and like, I don't like that voice. It's like too happy or something like that. And so, our conversation designers are also sort of like voice experts, and they go in and can help people navigate a sample of voices. And sometimes they bring their own too. And so we have the ability to clone a voice. And so sometimes they've spent a bunch of money before, like creating a voice. Yeah. And so we can just take those samples and build that into the AI.
Do you have customers that deploy different voices based on what they think this customer, trying to match, I don't know, demographics or whatever of the customer they're interacting with?
Yeah. So the most common one for sure by country, like if you pick up the phone in the UK versus here, of course you're gonna have different accent. You can also even do it by zip code. And so you can split the US, like you can have Southern accents or like, Boston accents and
does
things
that
like that.
Have an impact?
It has, I would say, like a mild impact, but it's like hard to say if it's like a huge thing. But I think it's just more of this general theme of how do we make it as personalized as possible. And so it's both the sound of the voice, but also what you say, right? So one of the big other advancements in the space in our product recently is this concept of user memory. And like the reason why ChatGPT feels like it gets better over time is that it can remember things about you, right? And so we give our customers, so the businesses that we work with, the option to turn on user memory, and where the AI is creating this dynamic memory profile so that over time it becomes more and more personalized. And the cool thing is that this memory profile doesn't even have to be specific to us. So you can actually like integrate it into the rest of your experience and have it just keep updating. And so next time they come in, we know exactly like what you've done in the app. We know exactly like what you talked about the last few times you contacted. And it just makes for a much, much better experience.
Do you think the business is going to remain balanced between chat and voice, or like do you have a view of where the world's headed?
Yeah, of course. So I think prior to Gen AI, the sort of the trend was, hey, let's drive everything towards chat because it's more efficient. You can have a human agent that is doing like 3 to 5 chats at once, whereas over voice, it has to be single threaded, right? I think now that issue is resolved because you can use AI. And I think in our view, it will be pretty balanced in the end, because there's just gonna be different situations, different demographics that prefer either one. Like, the common trope is, younger folks like chatting and older folks like calling. But, if I'm in the car and I'm like on the go, I'd rather call as well. And so I think both are very natural means of communicating. Voice is not going away. Like if you think about what voice is, like voice was like the original UI for humans, right? It's like before we had anything, before we had keyboards or phones or anything, it's like the way you communicate is through voice. And so that's not going anywhere. And
well, it's funny that we have these almost like, putting this voice thing aside for a second, we have like two contradicting trends happening right now. One is obviously the rise of language models and sort of everything in this chatbot. On the other hand, there's TikTok, which is like nobody wants to read everything short form video. Like the way people get news information is video. And in some ways, voice is like sort of the synthesis of these two, so you could see sort of cultural movement go back towards conversation if the technology is like able to deliver it.
Yeah. And I think it's just a much more natural form of communicating. And like now, even when I use ChatGPT, whenever I can, if I'm not in like a crowded room or something, I use the voice medium just because it's way faster.
I don't do that. Interesting. Does it get Does it get extra information from the emotionality yet, or no? It's just like reading it as text, right?
It does. So what that model is, it's known as like a voice to voice. So it's like kind of audio in, audio out, and that is, I think most people would say, including us, that is like the long-term future of the space. There are a lot of problems with those models right now. Like they're a little bit inconsistent and you have hallucination issues. So in production, when we work with like a bank or a telecom or something, like of course you have to be a lot more careful because you can't make any mistakes. And so you can't necessarily use the same technology as consumer ChatGPT for that. But in general, we think that is the future.
The challenge with voice to voice is it's like harder to sort of audit it in text, right? Or it's like
it's harder to audit.
It's like it lives in this voice to voice sort of. So there's like emotionality and stuff that we can't really translate necessarily to language. Is that the right way to explain it? Or like what's the barrier to voice to voice?
One of the barriers. So there's the main barrier I would describe as the hallucination rate is higher. Why is hallucination rate higher? There's a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that the number of tokens streamed by voice to voice models is a lot higher because similar to what you said, right? You're capturing more detail. You're capturing like intonation, etc. And so for any given sentence, if you chopped it up in text, it would, let's say, be like 10 tokens or something. In voice, it could be like 80 to 100. And the more tokens you have, the more opportunity there is to mess up. And so that's why you see higher hallucination rates in these voice-to-voice models. And a lot of the research the labs are doing is kind of geared towards making that better, because I think we all want the voice to be very emotive and like to capture our emotions, right? Just like we're talking right now. But until the hallucination rate is cleaned up, you can't really leverage them in these like big production use cases in our space.
How do you stop like weird edge cases or like, so an agent says something really sort of bad? Obviously a human could do that too. Like what are the systems you have where it's like, oh man, we had one really sort of fire off weirdly? Like you're sort of have another sort of layer of technology monitoring everything, or what do you do there to catch when inevitably some weird thing emerges?
Yeah, so that is a huge topic, and we think of it as like a three-prong problem. It's not just checking it during the call, which you have to do, but you also can prepare for it beforehand and review it afterwards. So the three prongs I would consider are before the conversation, during the conversation, and after the conversation. Before the conversation, what you can do is we call them simulations, and so you have these AI agents that you've made, and before you release them to any customers, you kind of run them through simulations. So it's almost like a second AI comes in and is talking to your agent and like trying to get it to mess up or testing all the common use cases that it's learned from reading historical transcripts, right? So that's the first thing you do, because that really shores it up, and that allows you to iterate faster. Because let's say next week I want to change something. Well, before I release it, I can just run these simulations and I feel good about releasing it, right? During the conversation, there is what you're saying. So those are like supervisor models. And those have to be like really fast, specialized models that go and detect for certain things. And so I'll give an example. Let's say we'll use the bank example again. Like one of the things that if I'm a bank, I would not want the AI to do necessarily is give financial advice, right? So I don't want you to give financial advice. That's not in the scope of what your job is. And so how do you make sure that it never does that? Even if the user is like trying to get, let's say they're like really determined to get financial advice. The way you do it is you have to have these supervisor models. And so there's these small models that we fine-tune ourselves that are really fast and really specialized in detecting things like that. And you run them during the conversation, and if it detects a violation, it can fix it in real time before the response goes out. And then finally, the third prong is after the conversation. And so there, what you do is you can review the conversations with a second AI, right? And we were talking a little bit before, but I think this is where a lot of the space is going, because if you think about the big advancements in AI right now, it's these slow reasoning models that are really good at coding and really good at reasoning. You're never going to use them in the middle of a call, because like they could take like up to a minute to reply, right? And you're not going to wait there for a minute. It's like, oh, give me a sec, and then it's like thinks for a minute, and it doesn't even like improve those metrics very much, anyways. But what they are really good at is kind of this like slow autonomous reasoning. And so one of the things that we've pioneered, and we kind of released the first product in our space.
What's it called?
It's called Duet. So Decagon Duet. And the idea is it's kind of a duet between that like slow reasoning model and like the fast one, right? And so the reasoning model, their job is they can basically run overnight and autonomously just like read every single conversation and, basically like figure out what is going well, what's not going well, figure out what you need to do next and actually do it for you.
How does it implement what it learns?
So the let's say it figures out like, oh, there's this one topic that we are not doing really well at. And I've looked at our knowledge base. I've looked at all the procedures. We call them agent operating procedures, AOPs. I've looked at all the AOPs. I've looked at like the coded tools that the AI is able to use. I've looked at, the data that's come in from these tools. And I've realized that the problem in this case is that, in this step of the procedure, we're like sending people off a wrong track because like they don't actually want to do that. And so because I've read 50,000 conversations, I'm very confident that the fix is XYZ, and I'll go in and suggest the fix. In the morning, someone on the team can come in and just like fix it. Right.
Wow.
So if you think about how the space generally works, like a lot of software, even outside of our space, people are building these AI assistants. But generally the AI assistants are there to like, show me how to find this, or like go do this for me, go do it. But what we're talking about, what Duet is it can do that, but it's also like a autonomous like agent that can run in the background. And that's what a lot of the coding tools are moving towards right now, right? And obviously I would argue that the work that our agent has to do is like a lot simpler than coding, so that they actually do a better job of it. And so that's really what we pioneered. And we have some folks in our space who have released similar things, but they're more focused on that like first use case of just like, okay, write this for me, rather than like actually something that can just like run overnight for several hours and like get a lot of work done.
I'm sure this is a piece of it, but how would you distill Decagon's right to win? I mean, obviously you have a very well-known competitor and then obviously an existing industry, and I'm sure lots of other startups I've never heard of trying to run at this space. Like, what is your right to win?
Yeah. So I think the thing about AI is that the markets are huge and there's a lot of opportunity. So that's a great thing. And then the flip side, of course, opportunity attracts a lot of players. And so in our space, you have like newer players like Gen AI native companies, like you mentioned Sierra, and you also have like the older ones, like the big platforms, Google, Salesforce, et cetera. And of course, our goal as a team is to destroy all of our competitors. And we have very we hire a lot lot of like killers on the team who are really motivated. You
ranked higher than Sierra on this list.
Oh,
which
great.
is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we continue destroying the competitors. No, but we have a lot of respect for our competitors. I think that's also something that's very important. Like when we're building internally, like you can't like you demean anyone or like underestimate anyone. That's very careful. But I would say ultimately what it comes down to is like a very different product approach. So I think the reason why in a lot of big spaces there are multiple winners, or in our case, if we want to be the winner, it is because you have to take like kind of a bet on a specific approach in the product. And our bet really is that the biggest differentiator for our products and products in our space over time is going to be sort of the empowerment of non-technical folks and sort of the decrease in the cost of ownership. So you think about how a lot of software normally works. It is the setup phase is like highly consuming. There's like whole like professional services industries based around this because you need technical resources to get Salesforce set up, for example. And there's a lot of benefits to that. Like you get really locked in afterwards. They're kind of reliant on you. But we think that with AI, you're going to have to take a very different approach. And a lot of our competitors are very grounded in the older approach, which again is
sign
not
a big deal, do it for the whole company.
And it's not necessarily bad, right?
Like
that's
you
like
want
a very
like a product
approach.
team to say, "Oh, we're going to use Decagon for our product."
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
And we want the ops team to be like, "Hey, we want to use Decagon because they're going to allow us to move a lot faster, and we're not going to have to rely on an engineering sprint or like call up the vendor every single time." So that's our biggest differentiator. And when
it's like Slack, where a team can deploy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when a lot of these businesses work with Decagon, it's because of that, right? They feel like, hey, we're a big business. We have a lot of complexity. Getting the AI live is maybe only about 20% of the work. 80% of the work is the constant iteration, and we're going to build a lot of new flows. We're going to have to add a lot of new surface areas. And if we're reliant on the vendor and it just kind of feels like a black box, that's not possible. Right?
You have tech companies are more likely to adopt Decagon, right? Or you've been strong in tech?
So tech, financial services, airlines, telecom. I think a lot of the older industries, we've seen the same thing where they have less strong engineers overall potentially, or they still have a very strong engineering team, but like they have a ton of other stuff to do, and like building customer experience software is not like one of the things that they want to specialize in, right? And so in the past, they would have had to hire a bunch of professional services or like pay the vendor a ton more. But in our case, it's really that has become the big differentiator versus the older approach.
There are a lot of Americans who hate AI. Like, how much do you think that's a barrier to your business succeeding? And like, how much do you think there's going to be sort of like a hearts and minds battle, or it's just the product has to speak for itself? Or what do you think sort of AI sentiment translates into like sort of people's willingness to engage with AI voice and customer support?
Oh, I think it's very important. I definitely don't think that's something you can gloss over, because and so when we're building the product, like a big mantra that we try to adhere to is that we're also building for our customers. Because at the end of the day, it's like the goal is to make their experience a lot better. And that, of course, benefits our customers, right? So if we're working with an airline and let's say we save them a bunch of money, but then all the customers are pissed because they can't like get what they wanted to do done. Like, that's not a win for anyone. Like, that might be a short-term win for the airline, but they know that like that's not really what we're going for. And so a lot of the product work that we do is geared towards like, how do you make the end experience better, right? Things like user memory that we talked about earlier. And those are things that
are you allowed to do that across customers? Or is it user memory within a customer?
Oh yeah, we don't do that across customers.
Okay.
There's no data sharing across customers.
Yeah.
I don't even think people would want that necessarily, but
yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, if you know me, why do I have to waste all the time? You know what my preferences are. But
so I think what will happen is there will also be consumer agents. So I think what the world looks like in 3 to 5 years is all the brands will have their own AI concierge, and hopefully we're powering and helping them a lot with those. But there's also going to be consumer agents that users use. So if you and I want to use something like
right, it's like having a lawyer. It's like their lawyer, my lawyer, sort of fighting with it, right?
And then the agents will connect.
Right. Isn't that going to be a nightmare for you? Like in some ways you have to brace for that world, right? Because like my agent, I assume will be meaner, and like there's a level of like propriety that I have, whereas they're just like going to treat you like a system to be sort of manipulated and try to find every hole to get what we want, right?
I don't think it makes our life harder. I think it is generally good for us and the world overall.
Because it creates an arms race you have to fight, or...
I don't think it's necessarily arms race. I think it's just, it creates much more communication. So It's much easier. Like I think right now, a lot of this communication doesn't even happen because like, I don't even bother calling that number because like, I know I'm going to get stuck in like some loop, but no, I'm going to tell my agent to do it. And the agent can actually get it done because like there's a business agent over there. And so it just makes like overall, like the number of interactions much healthier.
But you're not going to play on sort of my agent side, or are you interested in that side of the game?
No, right now we're very focused on working with businesses, and so the brand agents, if you will, the consumer agents, like I think ChatGPT will probably, it's like those type of tools will be the consumer agents.
You think it'll be ChatGPT itself?
ChatGPT, I mean, like Perplexity has an agent, Claude has an agent. It's like apps like that are like geared towards mass consumer apps, like Gemini, for example.
Do you think any of your customers will say you're only allowed to talk to us if it's you? Or like, have you seen people say, hey,
no, I actually think, I would say the sentiment in most of the businesses we work with is very positive. They're excited for agent to agent world.
Why?
Because I think that will yield more business overall, because it's like bringing the barrier to entry a lot lower. Right. So like if you're a hotel or something and like agents can make bookings on your like in your platform, then presumably you're gonna have a lot more because the barrier to entry is a lot lower.
Do you think like the rules of like who gets a refund when are gonna become more transparent because it's gonna be possible to sort of test every customer system and say, all right, if you say it's broken 2 days old, they'll get like, are the rules gonna end up being sort of publishable because it's gonna be so discoverable, or people are going to play this cat and mouse game, or they're going to sort of randomize it, or like what happens when it's, how do you see that playing out?
I think the steady state is that there are going to be no like games necessarily because like right now there may be some games because friction ads, et cetera. Right. But in a steady state, because it's two AIs working together, there are transparent rules. There also may be like judgment calls, but the AI is the one making the judgment call, so it's like fairly unbiased. I think that's the goal, and that's the world that we're driving towards. Right now, I think there's just inefficiencies because you have businesses that have like their leadership might not even like want these games to be there, but it's just over decades you've kind of built out these things, and you're kind of afraid to change it because like it might dramatically increase the number of inquiries coming in or change your P&L. But part of our job is to really work with them through that process and like design these conversations so that you're not losing anything. And in fact, you're both driving up your returns and making the experience better. And I think that's a big reason, back to your question of like why the space has popped off so much. It's really like you have these massive ROI case studies that have already been realized by big businesses, where tons of savings, tons of customer experience increases, and that's the goal.
Is what technology do you really want to see improve? And like, where are we on like voice latency? You also are in an industry that sort of has to rely on the past generation model. Well, you need sort of smaller models, and I'm sure it's a much more price sensitive customer base. Like, where are you most hopeful that technology improving and the models improving will change your business?
A couple different axes, right? So there's the reasoning models, with products like Duet.
Right.
The reasoning capabilities will continue to help those. Open source models getting better will continue to help our underlying agent pipeline, because like, why do you use open source models? It's mostly for performance, because you need latency improvements and you need the models to like highly specialize. And so we found that by fine tuning and training those models, we're able to get like much faster latency and much higher, like comparable to higher performance than the big closed source models. And then it's the voice models. And so, voice to voice models getting better and more accurate. I think those are probably the three big dimensions that we pay attention to. And each one of those improves significant things about our product.
What open source models are you most excited about right now?
You have people all over the world making open source models, right? So China's obviously very good at open source models. The open source models in the US are improving, and hopefully even faster. And you also have Mistral. And so I think we found that these models are like good at different things, and our customers might also have preferences. And so we have built in a way that's very model agnostic, and you can swap in and out different models. But yeah, we're very hopeful that the smaller parameter models will get better and better, because that is just those are very
using like
core.
DeepSeek, Minimax, any of those, or
Mistral, Quinn, we think pretty highly of, and then we're keeping a close eye on the Gemma type models, Llama, things like that.
You think you have to stay away from the Chinese models, or?
You don't have to stay away from them, but you want to be fairly diversified so that in situations where you don't want to use them, you can.
You just have some customers who don't want to.
Yeah.
Which then limits how much you can go all in on them.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to go all in on certain models anyways. It's like this. It's like you want to, because if you get over reliant, it's like, an analogy would be like, if you're a country, you don't want to rely on another country for all your oil. It's like anything can happen. So we want to make sure that we're building in a very robust way.
Do you build your own models, or is there any use in that?
We have our own models, but they're not like trained from scratch. So if you're in the application layer, what you're typically doing is you're using one of these open source models. The open source models are not actually going to be that good out of the box, but you can fine tune them. And if you do that correctly, they actually become very performant at the tasks that you want.
Are you optimistic across the application layer, or where do you think the foundation models will just gobble up applications, versus where do you think there's opportunity to build standalone businesses?
I'm obviously quite optimistic about the application layer. I think
just that you started early enough and you're sort of running alongside them, or what?
No, I actually think so. One, I think most of the value will accrue to the application layer because you're solving like business problems. I think the labs also would agree with that, which is why they're building a lot into the application layer. And I think the application layer is so vast that there's going to be a lot of different ways to handle it. But generally, I think a good framework is that most of the labs will want to build applications that are fairly broad and maybe like thin, because they have such a vast surface area that they want to build things that a ton of people can use. So coding obviously is one of those where it's mostly like a like an app that people can just pick up. If you think about our space, it's quite different. For better or worse, we have a very involved like post-sale motion where we talked about our conversation designers, but like they're part of like a much broader team that we use to actually work with our clients and get their agents stood up and like help write these agent operating procedures because we have the benefit of having the expertise. And because you have that post-sale motion, I think it's pretty unlikely that there's going to be an app that replaces it. But over time, I think the application layer is like so thick that there's a lot of stuff to build. So I think there's going to be a pretty bright future for most application companies.
Just as somebody sort of so close to the space and how things are developing, like how do you think the world looks differently in 5 years?
Specific to our space or just overall?
No, just broadly. Like what do you think, like, I don't know. Yeah. For the regular person just watching this, trying to understand how AI is going to change their lives. Like, what do you think feels the most different in 5 years because of what people are building today?
So a couple themes. So the first one in our space, we kind of touched on this, but I think the way that consumers are going to interact with any brand is going to be fundamentally different. And, hopefully we are, again, a major player in that. But if you think about the previous shifts, right? Like last one, let's say from internet to mobile, right? That basically created like entirely new UI for people to interact with, the brands that they need to interact with, whether to buy things or to get something done, et cetera. And AI is you can almost think of it as like a new UI. And this UI is conversational. And so you can talk to it on the phone, you can chat with it. But that is something fundamentally that's going to change. And you're going to have
but
agents.
Don't people like to push back on that? Some people like shopping, like some of these cases, it's like where people talk about like travel. And it's like people like spending time booking travel in some of these cases. Like, do you really think it's going to be like, hey, like text in, go figure out my travel, go figure out blah, blah, blah.
I don't think it's necessarily like a clean replacement, right? Like going from web to mobile, some people still, if I'm on my computer, I'll just use the website.
Right, and people go to stores, so right.
It's more of like a creation of a new medium.
Yep.
And yeah, there will be situations where I would rather talk to the agent. There might be other situations where I'd rather use the mobile app. And so you have this like new UI that's created. And this UI is a lot more friendly for consumer agents because consumer agents can also go to your website and try to click around, but that's like a very crude approximation. But agents, again, are very good at conversation. And so the two agents are talking. You just like back to my original point, you're basically just massively increasing the number of healthy interactions between consumers and brands. Whereas right now, a lot of them I would describe as like unhealthy or there's not even happening because I can't be bothered to do them. Right. So that's one big thing that will change. I think
it's always an argument that's like, if you hate talking to AI customer support, like don't worry. And I know you're trying to be better than the loops that everybody got. And so that in a lot of cases, they are happy to talk to you. But there is also the further pitch, which is soon enough, you can have somebody talk to us and then get the readout of like what transpired and you don't actually have to do it yourself, which I think people will be excited about. Okay. So that's one. Yeah.
That's one. That's specific to our space. And so we're really excited about that. I think that's why the market is so large and why there's so much interesting work to be done in our space. More broadly, I think something that will happen a lot more is right now, people think of AI as it's like a tool there. Kind of like Google, right? You go to Google and you like search something and like, okay, I go to AI and like I get something done. But I think in 3 to 5 years, it'll be much more normal to just have like AI running continuously. And it's just like always running on whatever. And it's kind of happening in the background, right? Because right now it's kind of like you ping it and it does something. But the sort of the standard practice that we're moving towards is just like long running autonomous things. And that's cool for a bunch of reasons. One, you can just accomplish like way greater tasks. And two, you can really increase leverage because like you don't even have to be involved, like it's just doing things. And so this is a big trend in the coding space. If you're following those, like a lot of what you started with. Go to sleep,
wake up and see what's happened overnight.
Exactly. Yeah. Or what started with like it's kind of tab auto completing things. Now it's it moved to okay, you give it some prompt and it can like write whole things and you review it. And then now it's moving towards like, okay, it's just like, hey, let me give you some instructions. And then like, you just kick it off and it's like a colleague doing work, right? That's the same concept again behind Duet, where we've kind of created this new concept of like a long running agent in the background. And I think that will happen with consumer agents as well, where you just give it like long tasks, or it's constantly listening to you, and it's just like a always there like helper.
Great. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the Newcomer podcast.
Cool. Eric, thanks for having me.
And congratulations for being on the list.
Thank you.
All right, sweet. Thank you. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Please, if you've made it this far, you've got to like, comment, subscribe. Excited to grow the channel. And of course, you can find our writing and reporting on Startups and Venture Capital at newcomer.co. We also host events. You can check out what we're doing at newcomer.events. Share the podcasts. Help us get distribution. Support the channel. Comment. Support. Like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Thanks for being on the journey with us. All right. See you next week.